really appreciate the time. What I want to do is this is part of our my branding is that we have accomplished a lot in their walk of life, and so I thought you'd be the right person to also be part of the series. So, thanks for taking the time. Before we begin, if you could quickly just give a short intro about yourself for the benefit of our viewers.
So I'm a freelance consultant right now. I help. I primarily help two sets of people. One is organizations that want to tell their stories to prospective employees. So
Okay.
I help them craft their stories. The other is I also work with technology startups in the HR space
Okay.
who want to reach out to HR decision makers in the industry.
Okay.
So I kind of work along with them to how they can tell their stories to the people who might be their buyers. So those are the two areas that I work with. And typically, I've worked in the corporate arena for now 21 years after my MBA.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, so I've worked in technology areas and I've been a freelance consultant. I've been a blogger for the last 18 years. So that's how I think my journey into employer branding, digital, social space started in the 2000 mid 2000s.
Right.
So that's me in a nutshell right now.
That's great. Yeah, and in fact, I do know that your blog has been featured in the top 50 blogs globally, and so that's some of the ways in which I've got to know you as a expert in this domain. So yeah, it's great to have you on this interview. So let me begin by asking you the first question. So according to you, what is personal branding? How do you define it?
So I have little mixed feelings about the term personal branding,
Okay.
primarily because both my undergrad and my postgrad studies have been in areas that have touched on both organizational behavior and marketing.
Okay.
So the phrase personal branding is I'm not really comfortable with it
Okay.
because
Okay.
according to organizational behavior, a person is a hugely complex, made of lots of things, and psychology and group dynamics and organizational theory all have
Right.
differing takes on what a person is. And
Right.
according to marketing,
Right.
goods and services
Right.
can be brands.
Right.
So the whole phrase personal branding,
Mm-hmm.
I still believe in the classic definition of marketing of Kotler's 4 Ps:
Mm-hmm.
product, price, place, promotion.
Right.
And so therefore, personal branding somehow doesn't really feel right as a phrase to me. But
Okay.
yes, over the last decade, it's grown. There's been a acceptance of the phrase itself. For me, I try to kind of uh, what do I say? The essence of that is, I think, reputation.
Right. Okay.
So it's a person's reputation
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to a certain capability or competence.
Okay. Okay.
And earlier reputation would be known by what you do on a day-to-day basis, and only you and your manager and your team, your subordinates would know your reputation. And when you
Right.
go from one company to the other, your reputation would precede you
Right.
depending. But now the reputation, thanks to digital and social media, is
Hmm.
not restricted to the people you work with. It
Right.
is now, cutting across. Your expertise can be showcased in
Right.
ways with people you haven't ever met or people you will never even meet.
Right.
But you might interact. You might interact on earlier in 2000s. We interacted with them on their blog comments,
Right.
uh, and with the rise of Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, we interact with them on Twitter conversations, YouTube comments,
Right.
and on Instagram comments, and so
Right.
on.
Got it.
So I think that is the way I would like to kind of come to terms with this term personal branding.
No, I mean, it's a great point, and it's a great angle to share, because that's, in fact, reputation is a great point to which you made, and glad to hear that. So when it comes to, considering yourself as a personal brand, I know you have a bit of resistance about the term itself, but as you have gone about your journey over the last many years, how did you begin to know that yes, people do associate you as someone who is an expert or a thought leader? So what was that? How did you
Um,
think that?
so I think primarily because I was lucky.
Okay.
You know, there was a bunch of us who started blogging in the early 2000s.
Right.
So my blog started in July 2002, but
Okay.
it started kind of catching up, or I started regularly blogging around 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And and in the meantime, I was also moderating some Yahoo groups around HR and knowledge management, which knowledge management was my first job. So there was a link with my first job in what was then called Satyam, which is now Tech Mahindra.
Right.
And so I started, chronicling what I posted these on. So somebody said, and I was part of some bulletin boards in the US around knowledge management.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said there's this new thing called blogs. It can act as a personal knowledge management tool. So you can, write your thoughts on it. So I said, what's the good tool? Somebody said Blogger. So I went and opened up an account in Blogger. And what I would do initially was, when I was posting these emails to these Yahoo groups, I would just cut, paste, and post it on the blog. I didn't know what to use the blog for.
Right.
And then somebody said, there is this thing called technorati.com. If you put your URL in there, you would find out which people are linking to your blog.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I don't think anybody is linking to my blog, anybody reading it, but I put the URL. Then I found out there are two guys in Canada who had a blog called the Canadian Headhunter. They were recruiters.
Okay.
And they said, hey, there's this guy in India talking about HR and careers and jobs. And, so that was the first kind of, and then I found out there were like these others, people who I'm still in touch with across platforms as we moved. And then that's when I found out that, just being the first one to write it, share it. So it's not really, people say thought leader and all. I'm again very apprehensive of that term. I'm no thought leader. A thought leader is somebody like Tom Peters, or in the HR space, somebody like Dave Ulrich, or even people like Josh Person. But it's just the fact that, so one of these Canadian hunters, his now Twitter handle is Animal. So one of the first things he told me was, if I want to find out what somebody in the Eastern Hemisphere thinks about HR, I only know you.
Okay.
So so it's like being the first one, and then it's a virtuous cycle. Then somebody asks them, do you know somebody in India? They would say, hey, ask Gautam. So, and there was a guy who was then working with Microsoft in the recruiting department. He came to Hyderabad to train the marketing guys on recruiting, etc. And he said, hey, I'll want to take a video interview of yours.
Okay.
So that started in 2004. I was also voted because there were so few of us amongst the top 3 indie blogs. So there was
Yeah.
there was an award category called the indie blog. So 2004, thanks to there being such a small group of people, I got voted number 3 indie blog of the year. So then I found out this whole the Sidin, Amit Agarwal, all the early bloggers, Amit Verma, and others. and then the whole Desi bloggers, Desi Pandits,
Yes, yes,
group blogs, and
right.
then there were tweet ups happening in Mumbai that I went to around 2009, 2010. They got to know the whole Twitter crowd, initial Twitter crowd before all the celebrities and the politicians and the film actors got in. It was a
Right.
small crowd of us, So those kind of just being, I think, early was a big factor in
Got it. Okay.
the so-called thought leadership or personal brand. Just lucky, I guess.
Well, I think you're being modest. I mean, there are a lot of people who have started early, but they haven't really been able to sustain it like the way you have. So I just wanted to understand from you, so when you went about, I mean, again, not calling it personal brand, but going about your journey, you know, what did you do consciously? So what are some of the steps you did? Like you said, you were religiously blogging from 2004. So what are some of the things which you did to consciously work on the aspects of personal branding?
No, I'm not sure how to. So one is I kept on writing.
Right. Okay.
Uh, so and at before Twitter, at least in 2005, 2006, I remember I was posting, and it was mostly like tweets. I was posting links to interesting stuff I wrote with some commentary about what that article was. So it was like almost 2 blog posts a day. But very, short, snippy. Here's an interesting article I came across, which is what we do on Twitter right now for a large extent. And so I think, and I gravitated, at least a part of me also kind of, I actually, so I took it on as a mission because I was seeing the benefit of sharing knowledge, of sharing not just knowledge, of information, of becoming a conduit for others. So when I noticed my peers in the industry, etc., everybody keeps his head down and concentrates on the jobs to do, and nobody really is looking out at the what's coming next. So at some point of time, I realized that this whole phenomena of social media, of conversations, the many to many conversations it spawns, is somehow going to disrupt the power structures within organizations and external stakeholders. The ones that I was most concerned about is stakeholders who would be employees, both internally and prospective employees or alumni. Also. So it still is a big mission, although that time I was amongst the very few people who would, was thinking about that. So I started telling people that when I went freelance after Deloitte, I started telling people, you have. So I was calling myself a blogging consultant then, because the term social media hadn't been, So I was like, you should start a blog, and why you should start a blog.
Right. Got it.
Sorry, I had a call. Sorry.
No. So you said no. So you said you kind of told people to start a blog and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that kind of became my mission, or obsession with me, to educate the HR community in India as to why they should embrace social media as a way to communicate with employees, with And of course, post 2009, 2010, that kind of became uh, slowly the acceptance or the cognitive understanding started seeping in. So I remember one of the first conferences of SHRM. There was a panel discussion on how social media is impacting HR. This was early 2013, 2014 onwards. And now it's become a, so I've seen, so what I'm proud of is, kind of being the early one to, talk about it. And a lot of people who are, currently thought leaders in it, I've at least done a small part to, bring them onto social media a little bit. So right now, also because there was this gathering we had at one of the conferences, and people started counting, saying, "Gautam, you've influenced me. You influenced that person. You influenced that person. And then it struck me, okay, so I have influenced some of these guys into becoming, and they're like bigger audiences than mine, etc. Of course, that's because they have bigger substance and have more experience than me. But I feel proud of the fact that at least I've done my bit in getting all these guys onto embracing social media itself and communicating with the digital medium.
Great. So when you talk to those people, like you mentioned some of them, so when they look at you, what are some of those key words that come to their mind apart from a blogger or social media consultant? So when they associate you with a personal brand, what are those keywords they associate? Or what are the attributes? So it doesn't have to be keywords. What are the attributes? So is it pioneer? Is it,
I've never actually really got around to asking them. But I think.
What do you think?
So recently, one person said, "What are the 3 adjectives you would use to describe me?" And if you tell me, I will tell you what I think about you also.
Okay.
So I told her, you're a fintech person. You're talking about. So these are the 3 areas you talk about. These are the 3 areas. Therefore, what it strikes me about you. And then she said, you're HR blogger, future of work, and social media evangelist or something she said. The third one I didn't remember, but I remember future of work kind of cropped up. And I think taking the, joining the dots, because this whole social media or impacting employee-employer relationship, etc. And now to which chronicling the whole remote work movement, work from home movement, thanks to COVID, etc. Future of work is something that a lot of us can be thought about. That everybody is really, and it impacts everyone. But it is an area that I think I have been talking a lot about or following a lot of people. So, for example, a person that I follow and actually had the pleasure of meeting in Bombay is actually somebody who calls himself a futurist.
Okay.
From Australia, and he was one of the first. And that's the first time I came across this phrase called description called a futurist.
Okay.
And and then I realized that organizations ask him to talk about the big trends that they see, and he's written papers on future of various industries. And I said, hey, I could take that title. I could be a future of work specialist.
Got it.
So I think that would be my preferred. I don't know what people think about me, but that I think will be a preferred. I hope people think about me like that. Is what I would rather say.
Got it. Okay. And so you mentioned some names in the past, but can you think of, based on your observation, based on your experience, people who, I mean, if you can give me one or two examples of who you think are personal brands. So I did hear some names like Amit Agarwal and some of them, but currently or in your domain, I'm not again talking about the Tom Peters and the, Dave Aldrichs
Right.
of the world. I'm saying in your community, who do you, look up to as a personal brand?
So, so for example, there's Abhijit Bhaduri.
Okay.
Abhijit has around 800,000 followers on LinkedIn,
Mm.
and he was one of the first HR leaders.
Mm.
I had the pleasure of getting onto blogging.
Okay. Okay.
So he says he was the one who said. So he was one of my first clients also when he was HR head of
Okay.
Frito-Lay, which is now Pepsi Foods.
Okay.
So he got me to talk about again 2006 September, I think it was, to talk
Mm-hmm.
about how uh, to talk to his HR team about what is blogging, why does HR need to think about blogging,
Mm.
and they actually started a Frito-Lay India blog on
Mm-hmm.
Blogspot,
Okay.
talking about So he's a guy who I think who experiments with various media. Now he's starting has a podcast going,
Mm.
constantly learning.
Mm.
Unlike uh, a lot of people who stop learning, so
Mm.
he's multifaceted. So he sketches, he
Mm.
acts. He had his own radio show when he was in Colgate Palmolive US and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so Abhijit Bhaduri as a brand. Then there's Leena Nair, the CHRO of Unilever, who's
Okay.
kind of taken it upon herself to be a diversity and inclusion voice for
Right.
diversity and inclusion globally,
Mm-hmm.
and of course also pushing Unilever in that direction. Also, she has she owns a hashtag, or she's kind of use a hashtag for learning with Lena across various platforms.
Okay.
So where she talks about her learnings, etc. every day.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, then there are others. There's Gurpreet Singh of Corn Ferry Hay
Mm-hmm.
Group,
Mm-hmm.
uh, who is a very so again he one of the first bloggers I influenced to get onto social
Okay.
media. We first interacted on this. I don't know if you remember this business network called Rise.com.
Yeah, 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 I do. Yeah. Yeah.
So again, interacted with him on Rise, convinced him to start a blog, and now he's a consulting partner with Hay Group, Corn Ferry,
Okay.
and also a coach. So
Okay.
he's one. There's Sairi Chahal
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
uh,
I know.
of
Shiros. Yeah.
Shiros.
Yeah.
So she's again. I knew her when Sairi was still an employee at Hydric and Struggles Knowledge Management Center in Gurgaon. Again,
Okay.
we interacted first on
Okay.
Rise.com. So again, a lot of relationships have moved from Rise.com.
Right.
There's a recruiter in Hyderabad, again, one of my first clients called Achyut Menon.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
so Achyut in those days wanted to target the returning to India from the
Mm.
US
Mm.
mid management segment.
Mm.
So I said, a blog is a great way to showcase your
Right.
so advise them. And
Yeah.
so then he's managed to build networks with freelance recruiters across the world,
Right.
and actively help him in uh, building his business,
Mm.
leveraging connections made socially.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
Then there's Harlina Sodi. She said she was so, uh, Vivek Paranjpe, who was advisor to Mukesh Ambani at RIL, got me and Adil Bandukwala, who was then with LinkedIn, to
Mm-hmm.
talk to the HR team at RIL. So
Mm-hmm.
Harleena claimed that she was inspired when I gave the talk at RIL to start leveraging Twitter, this thing. And now she herself has gone freelance over the last couple of years
Mm-hmm.
and started a company called Believe in You. And they
Okay.
are now offering programs on social leadership and
Okay.
coaching for
Okay.
employees of their clients.
Okay. Wonderful. Yeah.
So
These sound like well, people who have really taken their uh, specific domains to a different level altogether. Yeah. So Gautam, I mean, if
and
so
of
I
course
want.
there's Rashmi Bansal. Rashmi and I have been blogging buddies from again mid 2000s when she was first writing her first book,
Mm,
and which was Stay Hungry, Stay Foolish. She had
correct.
actually visited Hyderabad in conjunction with the research. I was based in Hyderabad then when I was working with Deloitte
Mm,
and when I first went freelance. And
mm,
we had actually met, and she was still known as the youth marketing expert of India before she became a full-fledged author. So I have
mm,
known Rashmi again, both offline and then when I was in Gurgaon, she actually released the book,
mm.
the first book. So I've known her from. Uh, so that is, she's gone into a different stratospheric level from her youth curry blog now, or to a totally different, almost Chetan Bhagat of business blogging, business
Right.
books in
Yeah.
India, which is
Right.
prolific and is
Mm.
known at a different level altogether.
Cool. So if I were to ask you, like, I mean, if there were any particular, you did mention that you kept writing and obviously sharing knowledge, and that's how people got to know you. But along the way, what were some of the challenges you faced? And of course, apart from the fact that it was a different era altogether then, and was there any challenges you faced along the way, and what did you do to overcome them?
Oh, monetary challenges have been the biggest challenges.
Okay.
So being a freelancer for a long period of time was, of course, challenging, especially in an area where not many people understood it. You had to, hope somebody understood, bought into it, had
Okay.
faith in you.
Yeah.
Uh, so I did a lot of traditional training also side by side. I did
Okay.
traditional soft skills training, managerial skills training, interviewing technique, kind of performance management kind of
Mhm.
trainings. In addition, with all
Mhm.
my, then of course I went back to the corporate life with
Okay.
Philips and Flipkart.
Right.
Uh, but in Philips and Flipkart, thankfully, my vision was remains the same. Remained the
Mm.
same of
Mm.
leveraging. So in both cases, I got lucky. A role was created for leveraging digital and social media for employer branding.
Okay.
So again, after
Okay.
that, yeah, I've been again on my own. Uh,
Sure. So if I were to ask you, I mean, so while you went through this journey, so what are some of the things you gained, some of the things you lost? So, for example, it could be a lot of time and effort has to be put in if you're blogging. So obviously, you would then have to prioritize between your personal and professional time. So what are the things that you gained, you believe you gained in the process of building this personal brand or the reputation, and what did you kind of lose?
so I've never really thought about it. I've never really thought about the whatever I lost, because
Okay.
that's a uh, that can go into a rabbit hole of despair if you kind of think about. So there's a temptation to see where my classmates are, and
Mm.
uh, from B school, and so I kind of consciously try not to do it. And of course, when they see me, they see somebody who's they're like, oh, everybody knows you, and so the grass is always greener on the other side. So so I try not to look at what have I lost. Uh, it has afforded me the luxury of working from home from a long time. So I've got to spend time with family a lot more than what my peers have done as they jet set around the world. Uh, it has enabled me to come back to my hometown, which is Lucknow, and get back to my roots, and still manage to work and connect with people globally. So when people say geography is history, yes, it is true for some of us. May not be true for a lot of people, but it's true for some of us. So I think overall, I consider myself lucky.
Okay. So if you were to give one piece of advice for someone who's starting to build their personal brand from scratch or starting their career from scratch, so what would be that one piece of advice be?
So I think one is explore before you find your niche. The niche has to itself be things that are that you find meaningful. So when somebody's starting a career, I'm not sure whether. So first phase has to be exploratory. You have to find out what you are passionate about, and are you willing to articulate it. A lot of people are passionate about something, but I don't know whether it's fear or shyness that lets them not articulate it, because articulating something is like one of the examples I give is when people ask me. So uh, there's this lady. She's now part of the has her own NGO, but she was a HR leader when I knew her with Tata Teleservices long time back. And she was asking, how do you blog? How do you manage to put out a point of view? I said, don't you have a point of view? She said, yes, I have a point of view, but my point of view changes. So if I put out a point of view today and I change it because, growth brings changes, perspectives change, I said, yes, that's perfectly okay, because each blog has a timestamp. In 2004, I might have believed something. In 2016, I might not have believed in it anymore.
Correct.
So, you don't have to say that somebody will point out what I said in 2004 and hold me accountable. I can always say, hey, that's what I believed then, but I've grown up now. I've grown. My perspectives have changed. My context has changed. I understand. So a lot of people, I think, don't want to put their point of view in black and white, because it means like putting a stake on the ground and saying, this is who I am. I think that's the courage one needs to do. Courage, or basically, I didn't ever think of it as courage. I just said, there are other bloggers doing it, so I might as well do it. I never really thought about why I shouldn't do it. But I think a lot of people in corporate world think, and I think I got out of the corporate world in time when I was like 7 years into my career, and didn't really shape my worldview that much. But if for a lot of people that worldview becomes ingrained of let's not do something rather than let's do something and we'll figure it out later. Because the corporate world, when I go to corporate worlds and they say we have a social media policy, that's again my favorite. Is it only talking about the don'ts, or is it also talking about the do's? Because most policies and organizations are all a series of don'ts, and so somebody who spent 15, 20 years in an organization and wants to build a personal brand, the don'ts come to him first, rather than the do's.
Got it. Okay, so a very, an interesting point about, so what you're saying is basically the risk-taking ability is or the fact that people don't want to take put their word out there and then be held accountable is what's holding people back when they go about.
They think they'll be, you know, every viewpoint now has, thanks to the times we live in, has a counterpoint.
That's true. Yeah.
And, and while I've seen this, I mean, I've seen it on political blogs, sports blog, movie blogs from
Right.
the mid 2000s. Somebody would say, "These are my 5 best Amitabh movies," and somebody would vehemently disagree with him, saying, "How could you write about this movie? That was crap," etc.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the comment section. So some of us, most of us who've been on social media for a long time are kind of immune to the fact that people
Right.
will find a point to disagree about.
Got it.
But when somebody starts on that journey,
Mm.
of finding that say somebody who's disagreeing with him online,
Mm.
it's a very different. They're not ready for it. They think it'll be like their subordinates at work. Everybody will say, "Yes, sir, you are right, sir." And what a genius you are, sir. But here you put out a word like, and the example that I keep getting people is when I blog, I'm putting out half-formed thoughts
Right.
out there, like a clay pot.
Mm.
You put it in and out there is the oven.
Mm.
It will attract heat. It will attract, but at some point of time, that heat actually makes it hard. It'll
Right.
make it ready.
Right.
So that's how I looked at my blogging. That here are these ideas that I have,
Mm.
and I toss it out into the open, and it gets picked apart by people much smarter than me. And I get it back saying, "Hey, these are interesting points, interesting viewpoints," and it makes me smarter in the process.
Right.
So once people realize that you will find out what you don't know, but there are lots of people out there who will add to what you know. They might not do it in the most diplomatic way. They might not do it, but if you see the essence, primarily if you're not trolling somebody or something, most people in that world out there are interested in contributing, and that is the beauty of I think social media overall. Why I'm still bullish about it, while people are talking about all the politicization and the negativity of social media, but still at some point of level, and I kind of came up with this model that I blogged about somewhere. First is you share. The onus is on you to share. When you share, somebody connects with one aspect of what you've shared, saying, and it could be something, and then you discover something in common between two of you, or between a whole group of people who all come back to you and say, "Hey, I've been through that experience," or I also like that movie, or and then you discover your community out there. And then once you discover a community, once you share, then you connect around a shared passion. The next step is you might start even collaborating with them, which is what a lot of, again, you asked people. So there's Kavi Arasu in Bombay, and Shahana, who were in the L&D domain, and who have now built, again, great personal brands in one small community. Not small community, it's a larger community, but not, there's HR, and there's this whole learning and development community within HR, which has people from HR and not from HR also, which has subject matter experts,
Yeah.
instructional designers, people who are not typically classified as HR people. So they've become global thought leaders in those circles globally. So there's and again, one of my very good friends, again a personal brand. You can quote him, Gaurav Mishra, Gauravonomics. he came up with this thing called you own a sliver of the world.
Mm.
He called it an idea sliver. So you can discover a niche all to yourself. The world there are so many infinite perspectives in the world. You can
Mm.
own one and you can make it your own.
Mm.
And then you will find people who are interested in it and you will discover a community. So I think that's I'm not sure how that has got to do with your questions about personal
No,
branding, but I
no,
guess
it's very relevant because I think it kind of summarizes basically the fact that if people need to explore, then discover, and then create the niche, and then you mentioned about forming the community and then collaborating. So I think it all adds up
yeah. I mean that's I mean when I look back as Rashmi's second book was connecting the dots. When I connect the dots, I think that's how my journey has evolved. Might not be true for everybody. Everybody will discover their own journey.
right.
But yes, at some point, everybody has this whole. I'm not sure whether you know Joseph Campbell's hero's journey.
No,
Uh,
I'm familiar with it. I've heard of it. Yeah.
so it's called a monomyth. So the whole everybody has a journey. Every hero has a journey. So, and the thing is, everybody is a hero. Everybody has their own journey. The hero leaves home and goes to an unknown area and discovers danger and discovers learnings,
Right.
defeats a metaphorical, or in the case of myths, real demons.
Right.
For us, those demons are our own fears, our own, insecurities or whatever. And it comes back home much richer than the person that he started out with. That's the Campbell's hero's myths, hero's journey.
Got it.
I have it. And George Lucas used it for Star Wars as a kind of.
I guess that's the grounding for storytelling.
Absolutely. So every story could be positioned as a hero's journey.
So Gautam, if you had the opportunity, if you reflect back on your journey, if you had the opportunity to change one thing in your personal journey, what would have that been? I mean, now that on hindsight, what would that be?
I don't know. Maybe earn some more money. Maybe. So I think, maybe be a little more financially responsible. Maybe do some investments and save up for a rainy day. I had really bad financial planning sense, and I still haven't built that part of my capability. I'm really bad at paperwork and stuff like that. So I understand where my weaknesses are, but I didn't do much to take that into account. Or the thing is, and somebody said, if you're a divergent thinker, you have to partner with a convergent thinker. You can go all over the place, but you have to have a partner to ground it back into reality, either on a personal level or at a professional level. So if you see two startups, two founders, one of them is a left brainer, one of them is a right brainer. We know the right brainers, but we don't know the left brainers. Or on a personal level also, you have to have a friend who has to keep grounding you, saying, "Kal ka socha hai." You can go up in these flights of fancy and imagination and models, but you have to have these people who bring you back to your brass tacks. So I think I've missed that one person in both my professional and my personal life.
Okay. And if I were to ask you, if there's one, in one line, if you were to summarize, what's your recipe for personal branding success? I know you don't like that word, but what would that one, or a career success approach, what would that one line be?
I think first diverge. discover various paths, find out your things that get you excited. When you do that, you feel you're having fun. If it is energizing for you, uh, if it is always exciting and fun, then it is something that you should stick with. You don't want it to become a chore.
Yeah.
You don't want it to become a burden after a point of time. So I think something that keeps on exciting you, something that and it's different for everybody. So I'm not really sure how do you find yours,
Right.
but even every day. So yesterday, for example, William Gibson retweeted a tweet of mine in which I had tagged him. So that got me excited.
Okay.
The author of Neuromancer, the guy who coined the terms cyberspace, has retweeted my tweet. So that made me very happy. Or, the days I have conversations with Tom Peters on Twitter, I'm like, oh, I would have had to pay $1 lakh in the mid 2000s to hear him speak in person. And now I'm having conversation with him. Those are the kicks that you get on a daily basis that keep making this journey exciting and happy for you all the time.
Got it. And so, Gautam, last question in terms of, now with all this COVID-19 happening, there's lockdown, people are scared about their jobs, unemployment, a lot of things which are happening. And around crises or when, things like COVID-19 happen, what are, some of the steps personal brands can take to mitigate it or think about it differently? What do you say? What is the recommendation?
So I think this is a time for all of us to concentrate on things that are within our control. A lot of things might seem out of our control, but focusing back on our connections, rebuilding relationships that people might have neglected over the last years, as and when they have got more and more busy. So I think that's the focus of consolidating back those relationships. People up, asking them how they are doing, hoping they are safe. I think just concentrating back on relationships in these times, and just I don't think this is a time of business development. This is a time of asking people for work, because I'm not sure whether or ask people. Just reaching out and saying, hey, I hope you're okay. It's been a long time since we chatted. What are you doing? So I think a lot of things that, for example, when my class WhatsApp group, so WhatsApp group, for example, of my batch of XLRI is dominated by 3 or 4 people, but suddenly when you see 25 people who have logged into a Zoom call, you realize some of those are lurkers. They don't post anything on WhatsApp. But then you see them and they're like, hey, where are you? Which city are you in? And then you will discover somebody's in Boston, somebody's Dubai, and then you discover 2 people are in Dubai, but saying like they didn't know the other one. It's a time of building those connections, finding out where everybody is, hoping they're happy and safe. Just wishing. I think that's the focus in these COVID times. I don't know. A lot of unknowns about work, about how it will be or when will things go back to the new normal. It will never go back to normal, I guess. But when will things go back to the new normal, where those are the unknowns. So I think thankfully some of us are privileged enough to be connected to each other, thanks to internet and phones, etc. And we should. A lot of people have also discovered their passion for giving back to the community. So, helping them, spreading the word out, of people doing interesting stuff. Even if you can't, but you
Mm.
can. What I've done is one of the things that I'm consciously doing is again somebody like Peter Griffin, and for example, in Mumbai, he
Mhm.
kind of comes up, he curates what people are doing to tide over the crisis for, say, migrants trapped in it or daily wage earners. And so,
Mm.
what I'm
Mm.
doing is I'm just amplifying those the little
Mm.
things that we can do to help
Mm.
others who are in need.
Mm.
Uh, Again, after doing a little bit of due diligence and figuring out,
Mm.
this is a just cause or a worthy
Mm.
cause to do that.
Mm.
I think
Got it.
those are the two things that I am doing. I'm not sure what others can do, but again,
Sure.
those are things that are within my control, and I think that's what I'm doing.
Great. This really been a excellent conversation. I really loved it. Thank you so much for taking the time. Is there anything else you'd
My
like to share?
pleasure. No,
Anything
that's
else?
it. I think I
Okay, great.
talked
I mean, I
enough.
really love talking to you, and thank you again. And what I'll do is after this call, I will obviously come back and share the transcript and then have this video posted.
Sure.
Yeah. So thank you again for taking the time.
My pleasure.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.